Welcome back for part 2 of our interview with pastor, counselor, and chaplain Reverend Ben Alvira, and his story from going from being a drug lord in Philadelphia to being used by God to bring others to Christ. On the first part of this story, if you haven't listened to that, definitely go back and listen to part 1 in the last episode. But in that story, we talked about more of his story of being a drug lord and coming to Christ and coming to repentance. And on this episode, we're focusing more on how God changed his life around and actually led him from being a drug lord to then saving others who had been in gangs and criminals and prostitutes and those who were broken, starting a counseling center, going through seminary. There's so much in this one. This one's jam-packed with just tons of examples of God's faithfulness. So again, you don't want to miss part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen to that first.
Absolutely. Welcome to the Happy Holy Hour, a podcast where everyday Christians grow in their faith through biblical examination and insightful discussion. I'm glad you're here today. If you enjoy the content you're about to hear, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and visit us at thehappyholyhour.org. Let's get started.
Because I spoke out against a drug dealer to put out a contract on me, in which they almost killed my wife.
Wow.
And they had my oldest daughter trapped against the wall.
Wow.
When I came. And I come to my house one day, and we used to live in apartments, townhouses, in which we had one, and my wife was the manager. And so a guy went to the office and pointed a gun at her. When she described him to me, I knew who he was. So I went to his house, smashed the door, grabbed him by the throat, and I told him, "You do not touch my wife." Then I started talking to myself where I had him by the throat. So I have to get out of here. I can't stay here. My family. One of the elders of the church that we had started in Philly, he had moved to Florida, to Winter Haven, Florida. And he had said, "Ben, whenever you want to come to paradise, come on down." Of course, Florida is not paradise because people live there. People live here because I'm living in Florida now. And so, but we moved to Florida because of that, because of the contract. And I put my family and my life in danger. And other people, I mean, there's more than I could say about it because there was this drug dealer that was shot and crippled, led him to the Lord, and now his boss wanted to kill him. And I had to come between him and his boss. And so, and then years later, I took him to church in Winter Haven, and I wanted to go on the mission trip. So they wanted to come to Philadelphia. I go, "What?" And I go, "That's great. It's great." But I called my friend who's planted so many churches in Philly. And he said, police chaplain, but he does street services like 3 or 4 times a week. And his church was known as the Church of No Names, of exes, ex-drug dealers, ex-prostitutes, you name it. And so I told him, I'm going to Philly, but, I hadn't gone there since I left. And he said, "Don't worry about it, Ben. Do not worry about it." Then we went to a street service. They have street services. My youngest daughter came with us because she could sing. All 3 of my kids could sing. And so she sang. And then I was given the opportunity to present the gospel. And I'm staring at this man who is blind. And I'm staring at him. I know this guy. When the service was over and we were praying, I went to him and I said, "I know you." And he said, "Yes, I'm the one that wanted to kill you." Yeah, he came to the Lord.
Wow.
See, people, Presbyterians, we're told that we do not believe in a God that answers prayer. Notice I haven't used the word miracle because I believe that miracle, it was to prove that the prophet, the apostle, spoke for God. Biblical miracles. The miracles of Christ, they were to show that he was the Messiah. It wasn't so people can get healed and feel good. Because there was a lot of people that Jesus didn't heal, like the American Indians, the Chinese, Japanese. There were people living in all those areas when he came to a small little place in Palestine. But he did it in order to prove that he was the Messiah. That's what Luke says. So then people tell me, so you don't believe that God healed a prayer? And I go, yeah, I believe in answer to prayer. But if I pray for someone and the Lord heals them, I'm not going to pack up my bags and go and I'm a great faith healer and become a multimillionaire in 30 days. I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. I told him, no, that's not the case. So I use my words carefully. So I don't believe in biblical miracles, but I believe in a God who answers prayer. And so the Lord bless us. From Florida then, went to Florida, planted some churches. I got punched out by a guy who was drunk. I was talking to his brother. And when I hit the floor, I hit my chair and I collapsed. I hit my chair with my head, the arm of my chair, and I collapsed. I couldn't move for months. And my whole body had swollen up. I had what is called rhabdomyolysis, which soldiers get them when they carry those 80-pound sacks. So when I got it and I was all swollen, but I was still alive, Atlanta, the Center for Disease Control, they sent some of their people. My wife, who worked at Temple Hospital in Philadelphia, she spoke to the doctors that she knew, and one doctor told her, I've been doing research and exactly that. So he contacted, because the doctors in Florida had no idea what to do with me. I was just laying there dying. And so, but then they concocted some stuff and fluid. After about 2 weeks, the swelling went down, but my left arm and my left wrist did not heal. And they were swollen. And it's a disease that next to advanced cancer is the most painful. Paula Abdul has it. That's why she was taking the medication that makes you wobbly and she was taking too much of it. And when she was in that show, what is it called? The ridiculous show about the idol. And she started speaking about a singer, but the guy hadn't sung yet. And she was critiquing his singing. And so they took her off the show. Jerry Lewis, the big comedian, he had it also. You last about 5 years.
Wow.
Because what happens is the pain becomes so much that you want to lay down, you take advanced pain medication. When you lay down, you die. I've had it for over 20.
Wow.
And my doctors, I was driving crazy. Even today, I told them, you give me pain medication, but I don't want nothing addictive. I don't want anything that's going to put me in bed. So they had to comb the globe to try to find medication for me. And the medication that I take only heals it by about 50%. Like right now, in my left hand, I can't bend it. If I do, it's going to hurt. I can't make a fist with my left hand. A few years ago, I got it. It just went throughout my whole body. This is why I was in Camden. The Lord brought us, because you asked me about a Camden question. Yeah. The Lord then brought us from we went to Florida, planted some churches. When I got injured, therefore I could not pastor. I was wheelchairs. I gave up church that I had started. And they didn't want me to give up. I told them, look, I cannot pastor. I don't want you paying me. So I came back, and that's when I went to seminary and took another year. Because I said, if I can't pastor a church, I'm going to teach pastors. So the idea was for my wife and I to move to the Philly area. The Lord took us to Camden, not Philly. Okay, but I went to seminary, and while in Camden, in a I was in the OP when I moved from Florida. I went back. I was in the PCA while I was in Florida. Then I went back to the OP. I think they're more conservative than any other denomination. They're not sinless, believe me, but they're better than most that I know. And so anyway, I went to the OPC, and right away they had me planning a church and planning a ministry in Camden. So I started a counseling ministry because Camden was at that time was number one for murder in the United States. Chicago took its place, but it's still in the top five. Camden, you go there to die. They don't even have a mall, and they don't have what's that organization? The all Christian organizations. The big one that's they left Camden. It's too dangerous. Okay, but this guy wanted to start a counseling ministry in Camden. So we met. I started visiting his OPC church, and we met. He's bilingual too, and so he told me if I could help him start a ministry. And I told him sure. And I told him how much money you got. I thought he was going to say, $100,000, $200,000. He had $13. So that means we had to beg. We went to Walmart. And then there was this building, and right in the middle of the worst part of Camden. And the first floor was a clinic that the Catholic Church had started, but there was no hospital in the area. And girls who were pregnant, the first time they saw the doctor was when they were going to have the baby. Wow. That means there was a lot of death. Okay. 3 out of 5 babies were dying.
Wow.
So they started that clinic. But the second floor was empty. The city was using it for a dump. So we met with the mayor, and we told him that we want that. We want to use that for ministry. That would be tremendous. And he said, well, he has to talk to city council to see how much they would charge. We looked at him and we laughed. We didn't say we were going to rent it. They're going to let us use it. Or we're going to be here with the TV cameras. We're going to say that the mayor would rather use this building, second floor, as junk instead of giving it for 2 guys that are going to use it to teach people, to train people, to counsel people. So they gave it to us free. Then we had Walmart, and they donated computers, all office supplies. And then I developed a program, GED program, that I presented it at the time, Faith-Based Ministries in Trenton. But I didn't want them to tell me what to teach. So I developed my own program. And I told them, okay, the thing that we're going to sign is that you're going to give us $50,000 if at the end of the year we got 11 people to take their GED pass, and that 90% of those, which means 9 of them, pass. And they said, yes, okay, I'll sign that. I developed for grammar, I developed a grammar course using the book of Ephesians. The first lesson on history, I make this statement. If you take the church out of history, you have no history. For history is God's dealing with his people, and the surrounding people that are not his people, they're just there to help his people. But the main show of history is God's church. And so, and I said that. I taught math. Remember, I didn't know the times table. I taught algebra 1, algebra 2. I don't know when I learned that. In English Lit, history. I used to hate science. I only went to the 9th grade in science. But now I was teaching science. I was also doing counseling. And the counseling that I was doing was abused woman, suicidal. There was this young girl, 18. She looked like she was 50, very skinny. She came to us one day. She wanted to get her GED, but I knew she wanted more. And so we sat down and we talked. And then I got my wife to talk to her. Okay. I'm talking to her. This is one afternoon, and my back is to the door. And I hear this voice, get over here. It was the guy that was selling her for drugs and beating her. And I looked at her and I told her, you do not have to go if you do not want to. And she says, I do not want to. When I turned around, the guy had a blade, had a knife. At that time, the director, the guy that worked with me, big guy, he had called 911. And he was also walking towards the guy. And I told him, you want to stop? Because you see that guy, he already called the cops. And he's coming towards you. And he's angry. And if you come a couple of more steps towards me, you might get hurt. Because before you were born, I was one of you. So the guy ran, got arrested downstairs, charges against him, got the girl outside of the city. The last I talked to her, she was married with children. And the Lord just blessed. So we've seen that. We've seen that. Oh, we've seen some failures. There was a girl that her stepfather was a Satanist. The mom started coming to church. The girl was being beaten by her stepfather. The mom couldn't do anything. So we took the girl away. She started living at our house. The guy put a curse on me, and I laughed. A few years later, he died. I did not. And so, but she stole from the church. And she stole jewelry from a church member. And I called her. And I told her, sweetie, you could have stayed here till you got married. We would have gotten you to college and everything. You would have had it made here. But I can't have someone that's stealing the church offering and stealing from members. And I warned you before. Now, when you go out, you're going to tell people that I threw you out. You're not going to tell them the truth. But God, myself, and you know the truth. About 2 years later, she got arrested. And she got charged with manslaughter. Never heard from her again.
Wow.
So I've had my failure, but I've had my success. And I rather look at those. In fact, there was a church member that were telling me, okay, now that this girl stole from us, but Ben, are you going to stop having people live at your house? I said, why? What about these 3 people? No. Now, the last ones that we had was 3 girls. Oh, no. Then we had another girl. While we were in the Poconos, after you left, we had a girl for almost a year living with us. You didn't know that. She was a 14-year-old. Yeah. So I thought that wasn't going to happen again, but only the Lord knows. But in Philly, we had kids living with us. In Florida, we had kids living with us. We had, my wife has a large family, and her brothers and sisters, not believers, most of them, and they had kids, and their kids were a mess, and they would come and knock on our door. And we had a lot of them. There was this one girl that she was a mess. She's been married now. Wow, she has a son that's married. Oh, they're going on the 25th anniversary. Yes. Her and her husband, who has been an undercover police officer, and fantastic. Yeah, she got married from our house. And so that's a success. They're believers. Their kids are believers. There's generational.
Yeah.
See? And so I forget about the failure. I look at success. And then one of the things that when I started being called to pastor churches, I made a condition. I told them, look, I don't like to go on cruises. My wife and I, we don't take thousands of dollars vacation. You're going to get me cheap. As long as I can pay my bills, put food on the table, etc., you're going to pay me about 2/3 less than what you would pay somebody else who wants vacations and everything. Okay? And when they would offer me the call, and I told them, no, that's too much money. Let's cut it. But then I told them, but I want one thing. That extra money, I want an intern. Because I want a Timothy and a Titus. And I haven't pastored a church without an intern. Because that way then, now like I go to Philly, I go to North Philly, I visit this church, and I look up at the guy preaching, and I go, man, the first time I saw him, he was throwing up on my feet, on my shoes, from being a drunk junkie. And now he's a pastor.
Wow.
And I said, wow, Lord, but why me? Because I'm not worthy. But to me, that's important for the next generation. Then the biggest shocker was a few years ago when my son, who is an athlete, he got his degree, bachelor's degree in sports training. So he had professional athletes in which he would train them. And then one day he just comes to me and he said, Dad, I was teaching a Sunday school class, and I was teaching then an adult Bible study. And the pastor, who actually was the best man in my son's wedding, and some of the elders told him, you should be in the ministry. So he shot me, Dad, I want to be in the ministry. I want to be like you. I didn't know what to say. So I just said, go to seminary. And so he went and he graduated this past June. And then in January, I was in Jersey at the second week of January because he was ordained and installed in an OPC church. I mean, he had just finished seminary and he's pastoring and the church is doing great. Only been there for a few months, but the church is doing great. And his wife and his 3 children. And he went to seminary with 3 kids. And his wife, who just had high school, but she worked in the home selling luggage and stuff. And I remember when they were doing their taxes, when they looked their income, and my son tells his wife, "You make more money than me." And she said, "Yeah, that's why you can go to seminary." And I told him, "Son, when you get your degree, remember that. Thank your wife." And so when somebody tells me, "Well, I got 2 kids," notice I said 2. How can I go to seminary? And I go, "Oh, please. I had 4. Don't talk to me. Do not talk to me." And my kids always had food on the table, always had a roof over their head. Sometimes at the last minute, the Lord would provide. When I was going to seminary after 1 year, I went to the office and I told them I'm not signing up for this semester because I just can't afford it. I said, I'm walking out. The office manager, she calls me back. And she said, wait a minute, Ben. She looks at my chart and she said, you are paid off till you graduate. And I go, excuse me? She said, yes, someone paid for all your seminary. And I go, but that's like $75,000. And she said, someone paid for your seminary. I find out later that a fellow student had told a friend of his, and she told her parents. And her father, he's a millionaire, but he made a commitment to the Lord. As the Lord blessed him, he was going to separate money to pay for future pastors.
Wow.
So he paid my seminary. Wow. I could never afford that. My son, mostly all his seminary is paid for. And I told him, you don't take that, you don't take a supposed leap of faith. You have to think rationally, intelligently. But please don't tell me that you can't go because of lack of funds. That you can't tell me. You can get the funding. Okay. And when you say, well, I'm taking a chance, and I go, well, you see, you want guarantee. You want to have a church before you finish seminary, before you go to seminary. You want the guarantee by the denomination. So what if you're an accountant and you get a job, it's on the other side of the country, and you're working as an accountant for this company, and then after a year, the company ceased to exist? What are you going to do? Yeah, but you promised that I had a job. Yeah, you had a job while they existed and while they needed you. So don't tell me that the ministry is different. The difference in the ministry is that you got a large family behind you. And so the Lord has blessed us in that way. About 11 years ago, I was living in South Jersey, had 2 ministries, but then I was getting tired out. And we started, by the way, we have now 4 OPC Reformed churches in Puerto Rico. I had prayed for the island because it's not evangelized, it's not Christian. The Christian that it has is either Roman Catholic, Jehovah's Witness, or Pentecostal. There's some Baptist churches and all that, but no. The Pentecostals are the strongest. And the Reformed faith was not able to penetrate. Well, I said, yeah, right. And so I got 2 churches first, 2 pastors. The churches were not Reformed at all. They didn't know anything about the Reformed faith. Now, the pastor, I met him in Florida, and I spent 18 months training him so he could get ordained by the PCA. He already was in another denomination. He's the guy that now lives around the corner from me. He retired from Puerto Rico. But he's another success, man. The Lord bless him. And now we got 4 churches in Puerto Rico.
Praise God.
OPC churches. Wow. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I prayed for 1. So the Lord, I said, man, I think my God is too small. So I got to pray for more. Now we got 4 and we got a mission church. And so the PCA has been trying for years. CRC has been trying. Nothing. Small little Bible studies here and there. We got 4 self-supporting churches.
Wow.
Praise God.
You see? And we got the guy that took over my friend's church when he retired, and he was around the corner from me, the pastor, that then we moved here. We got a Sunday school class in Spanish, the church that we're attending, and we had also a Wednesday Bible study in my house. The COVID-19 virus kind of slowed us up. I wanted to keep going, but the people, they got nervous because there's a counseling center here that I know they can use me, and I was ready to go and everything. And I say, hey, you got me as a freebie, because I wanted to train their counselors because they're not trained in biblical counseling. So that way it's not a revolving door. People come in and people leave, but that the counselors are certified. And they have 4 different centers. So it's a large Christian counseling center that don't just deal with drug addicts, and that's a problem. I said, because if you just deal with drug addicts, then that means people that have other things are not going to go. But if you have counselors that are trained, like I deal with, depression, suicides, all kinds of people that got so-called road rage, split dual personalities. It's like 100 different diseases and everything. Part of my work for my degree was that I took that DMS-5 now, which has all the psychiatric diseases, and I took one after the other, and I saw if there's a biblical similarity with it, and about 30%. They changed the names, but it's biblical too. But they're just counseling the wrong way. And so I was able to, the research, and now it's a DMS-5. So anyway, we do, I have done a lot of counseling like that. Abused women, dealt with it a lot. My expertise, believe it or not, is abused children. And I dealt with that a lot. And most psychiatrists and or counselors that deal with abused kids, they don't last more than 5 years.
Right.
Because the trauma. I was punched by a father because I confronted him because he was whipping his daughter. And we took her away, and he punched me. Never going to do that again, because then he was charged. I told the cops, I want to charge him. Yep, I want to spend a lot of time in jail. So when you come out, come and see me again. Because I tell people our center was right there in the Drugsville. Oh, this is a funny story. Okay? Sort of funny and sad at the same time. The mayor in Camden told all the pastors that if you're here during the evening, please wear the collar. The Roman Catholic collar. Priestly collar,
right?
Because drug dealers apparently still respect the Roman Catholic Church, Roman Catholicism, and the priests, because of their parents taught them that. So they're less likely to kill the priest because a pastor was murdered. So I was wearing the collar, and I got a call at Cooper Hospital. That's the main trauma center there in Camden, and I was the only counselor that spoke in Spanish. And there was this 12-year-old girl who had been raped and beaten. And she was taken to the hospital, but she would not allow the doctors to touch her because they were men, and she had never been touched by men. So she was bleeding and kicking and screaming. So I come into the room, and I spoke in Spanish. She stopped, and she grabbed me, and she started talking to me. And so I calmed her down. So I told the doctor, you got to get a lady doctor here, female doctor. So now they had to do a drug kit. And there was this male cop. I told him, man, you're not going to work. Come on, get me a lady cop. But the girl wouldn't let me go. She grabbed onto my hand. And so I was ministering at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I go to the parking garage. I had the collar on. Behind me then, I feel something in my back. And then the guy says, turn around. And he has a big gun pointed at me with two other guys. But when I turned around, he saw the collar and he said, oh, I'm sorry, Father. And he put the gun down. Well, it wasn't time for me to tell him that I'm not a priest. I told him, that's okay, my son. Then he asked me for something that I had no idea how to do. He asked to bless him, to give him a blessing. Well, I never learned how to do that Roman Catholic thing, where you touch your head, etc. So I stood back and I just did the tic-tac-toe sign. Tic-tac-toe. And I went two up and two sides. And then I said, bless you. And he stared at me. I went to my car and I saw him and he's trying to figure out, is this a new Roman Catholic thing? and then I left. So you kind of learn to deal with these kind of characters. But if one shows any fear, that's it. They're useless. And I had people that wanted to minister, to help me in a counseling center. But then they got afraid when a dealer came to him. Or they crossed the street when they saw some guys that were stoned or drunk. I crossed the street to walk towards them, not away from them. So I remember telling this guy, you're not, either you're going to pastor a suburban church or whatever you did before you went to seminary, that's what you're going to do. But you're useless to me because you're scared. And they see it. And I told them, plus, be careful what you tell them, because they're going to hold you accountable. I remember that this 13-year-old boy, and I witnessed to him, and he was getting high, just on marijuana at the time. And then I made this statement. Whenever you want to talk, I told him, you have to talk to your father. I told him, when you're willing to do that, and you want to talk, give me a call. He called me. The day after that, it was my Greek final. And I go, oh, no, I got to study. Am I going to study or am I going to meet this boy? Forgot about study, met the boy. Went to his house. He told his father what he did. His father was ready to hit him. I came before the two. And I said, sir, you would never know if he didn't tell you. So calm down. He did calm down. And the boy quit smoking, got the help that he needed. I counseled him. I got a C in Greek. It was the only C I ever got in seminary, and it was my best grade.
Oh, wow.
You see, because, and I told my son, the pressures of a seminary, I told him, but remember, you have a family. You have a church family. And so, don't give those things up. I told him, because your pastor's going to hold you accountable, your session's going to hold you accountable, and I'm going to hold you accountable. Because I'm going to ask your wife. I'm not going to ask you if you're spending time with her and the kids. I'm going to ask her, and I'm going to ask the kids. Not you. And so, but he did it, you see? And so, you got to say what you mean and mean what you say.
Yeah.
Now, when we moved to Streamside, at first I didn't want to go. But at the time, I was, another church and group took over the ministry that we had in Camden. It's still there, okay? But now, with the churches in Puerto Rico, I was the one that would go back and forth because I was training them in the Reformed faith. So, and especially because the churches were new. The pastor was Reformed, but his church was not. And so I had to help him. And we hope that, few people left when you started with infant baptism. The big one was dispensationalism. We're not. But we didn't lose a family. I thought that we would, but we didn't. So my wife wanted to move to a place where she could have peace for a while. That's why we moved to Streamside. And my youngest daughter, who her husband worked there, she was tired of him coming from home, and they lived right there. But at 8 o'clock at night, he was coming home because the secretary that they had, the office manager, she still was using a typewriter. You see, so my daughter wanted my wife to come. So we went, we looked at the place, and I said, okay, if I'm staying in that house, I have an office, and we do have an airport, Allentown, that directly to Puerto Rico. So I told my wife, I don't care where we live as long as I have that. I have an office. And it got even better than that because then I taught at the camp. And I was able then to meet some young men. You were part of that group, which now one is already finished college, going to seminary. And then now Gregory is doing college and he's going to go to seminary. It's 2 kids, but his wife already told him, I'm tired of you complaining about your job, where you want a job where you're in God's word consistently and working with people. So that's what my wife told me. She was tired of it. That's why you're going to go. You're going to go to the ministry. And so we moved there, and it was fun. I also taught a Christian school where I taught high school 5 subjects at a Christian school, including chemistry. Because when I lived in Florida, I got a job at a company which was owned by Procter & Gamble, and I got a job at the lab, and I learned chemistry. I didn't know what was chemistry. And then now I'm teaching high school chemistry, and I sit down and I go, why, Lord? How did I get this? And I could memorize all those. Oh, man, chemistry is the hardest subject. It is the worst. And then I was teaching Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. In fact, one of the daughters of, one of the men that live across, then now she's finishing up her 2nd year at Geneva. And this girl kept flunking algebra. And so her mom, they lived across the street from me, mom asked if I could tutor her. So I tutored her, and in 6 months, she passed algebra, and now she's going to Geneva because she wants to study to be a missionary. This is the girl that talks a lot. And she wants to be a missionary now. It was, wow. At first she wanted to be a movie star. Now she wants to be a missionary. And so, the Lord, he blesses.
Yeah.
He blesses.
Absolutely.
And the Lord, he blesses. And so now, I'm here, don't know where I'm going to be next year. But I know that, we got this church that we're going to, and now we got a Sunday school class back. And I want to start a Bible study because now watch this one. We got a family that used to be Pentecostal when I was in Philadelphia, and I led them to the Reformed faith, who her brother-in-law was an elder in my church in Philadelphia. My wife got him a job here in Florida, and then I trained him to be a pastor in a Hispanic church, a Reformed church, recently retired. Well, this woman, sister-in-law, just moved about 20 minutes away from my house, about 20 minutes away from our Reformed church. Her husband, her son, her daughter, and their kids. And they're all going to start going to this church. And so that's a Bible study right there. Oh, yeah. And especially because the daughter and son, they really need the Reformed faith better. And her husband just loves the way I teach and preach.
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, he's just fantastic. And I go, why? I don't see myself as anything special. It's just the Lord uses it. And then there's pocket of things that just happen. Like 5 years ago, I got an email. Okay. And the guy, I thought it was a girl because it has, I forgot the name, but it's a girl's name. But it's this guy's name is pronounced differently in Spanish than in English because he's from Cuba, living in Cuba with 3 other pastors. And he's emailing me repenting because he got some of my sermons and he's preaching them in Cuba. And I told him, you don't have to apologize for that. I have to repent for that. I don't think they're that good. Talking about anything that you can get, I'll put stuff in. And if you want it, it's yours.
Wow.
So now we got guys in Cuba that are presenting the Reformed faith. And we've got one guy there's one guy, his name is Joyce. It's pronounced Joyce in Cuban. Okay. But it's spelled Joyce. And and now he's writing stuff because he got into these freebies that you have from the internet where you can learn Greek. There's no excuse for learning. Because when you have seminaries that give you free courses. By the way, my wife's ex-pastor, he has started a class. It's a freebie, seminary level class on presuppositionalism.
That's Lane Tipton.
Yep, Lane Tipton. And it's a freebie. You want to learn systematically. You want to learn why I'm Ventilian and presuppositionalist? Well, you take that course. And you can go to, there's Scott Oliphant, course in systematic theology. You can, the seminary over here in Florida, you can actually go to seminary without leaving your house and get a Master's of Divinity. And I'm talking about the same courses that you would get if you went to the seminary. Like, for example, Reformed Seminary here in Orlando. Westminster is moving in that direction. And so there's, my son took about 25% of his classes he took at home because from where he lived to Westminster was like an hour and a half drive. And so he only had to go twice a week because he took some classes at home. Well, I've talked a lot.
Yeah. Well,
I hope that I said what needed to be said. The thing that I would leave you guys with is, don't worry about, to me, let me put it this way. To me, if you're doing ministry, you're not a failure. There was this youth director of one of our OP churches, and he was dejected because he started this youth ministry, and the first Friday said there was like 60 young people. But then after a few months, it went down to 11. And he said, he's a failure. And I go, excuse me? While those 60 were there, did you present them with the gospel? And he said, yes. Okay, then you're not a failure because that's your job. Your job is not to save people. And you got those 11, concentrate on them and be joyful that you got them. But you're going to lose them too. I told him, get over it. It's not about you. And so to me, there is no failure if you're doing what the Lord tells you to do and you're presenting the gospel. We're epistles, and for the people to read us, we got to be bold. We got to be willing to, to take our hits. But, you got to stay firm to Scripture. The church that we attending, they never stop having services. That's why I'm still there. Because the Bible doesn't say, thou shalt meet the first day of the week, except when, no. Providentially hindered, I could understand that. If you can't, but you can then see your service through the internet if you can't attend. But because the human government says you can't, no. What happened to, are we going to serve man or God? And so you got to be faithful.
Yeah.
And God blesses that faithfulness. And sometimes you got to put yourself out there. And here I am in this small town in Florida. But already my wife knows we live in this, we have a nice small house in this place. And there's about 80 or so families. And I think my wife knows about 40% of the ladies. She just walks around and begins to talk to them. And now they come and they knock on our door to talk to her. She started going to Zumba classes to meet with these ladies, and she's presenting them with the gospel. Because most of them are not believers. Why? Because they live here, they own a house here. It's because they're rich. And there's some of those winter residents, and so she's able to witness to them. And so that, you just got to look for those open doors, and you walk in. But your kids, Travis, when they get older, they're going to have the best testimony that anyone can have.
Amen.
See, they're going to have the best. Because they're going to say, the Lord kept me. And I have 9 natural grandchildren. And out of the 9, 6 are old enough that they're members of their churches. Reformed churches. So out of 6 out of the 9, the other 3 are growing so that they're going to become members.
Amen.
They're all baptized into the covenant when they were babies. And God doesn't promise that all our children are going to be saved and that they're part of the covenant. That doesn't guarantee it. But you know what guarantees the salvation? If they've been elect.
Mm-hmm.
But since we don't know who's elect, we got to teach. We got to teach the same thing that we teach to Jacob. We got to teach Esau. Well, we got them.
Yeah.
And so you just teach them and you expand the church.
Yeah.
And is your buddy there? Is he married?
He will be soon, in about a month.
Yep.
Wow.
Very soon.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Ben, it's been a privilege to hear your story and your testimony. And the one word that I could use to summarize the whole thing is just faithfulness, God's faithfulness to you and to his church and to his people. And it's truly an amazing testimony of God just calling his people to himself and using his people for his glory. I'm blown away. I was speechless pretty much the whole time.
Look, sorry.
No, Uncle Ben, we really appreciate you having, you coming on and spending the time to talk.
I want to see you guys come over here.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. We should. Maybe sometime we'll come down and we'll do a video version of this. That'll be fun.
So here's the way I put it. That God just loves to take what the world considers as nothing and glorifying himself with them.
Yeah.
And so I was a nothing, a nobody. Should have been dead on numerous occasions. You know it was at the camp.
Mm-hmm.
I got ill. I was rushed to the hospital. I was bleeding to death just a few years ago.
Yep.
And I was laid in the hospital bed, and they couldn't stop the bleeding. They gave me blood transfusion. This is while I was at the camp.
Yep.
And then I was knocked out. The doctor came in, and the doctor, female, she told my wife that there's 2 options: blood transfusion and see if they work, or you can just make him comfortable. And I couldn't speak, but I was thinking, make me comfortable, And my wife said blood transfusion. I said blood transfusion, don't make me comfortable. Make me comfortable meaning that they were going to let me die. And so I got the blood transfusion, and a week later I was home.
Yeah.
And so, the Lord just, and sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. Yeah. I have one of my grandkids. When he was born, he was given a day to live.
Wow.
It's Noah, my daughter's son. This week he turned 16. And he couldn't breathe. He couldn't urinate. His kidneys were shut. And they told my daughter, you got to take him off the machine because he only has a few days and there's no use. When they were going to take him off the machine, a nurse that got attached to him, because he had all these tubes and everything, said, if his bladder is shut, if his kidneys are shut, how come he's urinating? And we said, stop, no machine. No, you keep him alive. I told the doctor, you keep him alive. And a week later, he was home. And now he's going to be 16. In fact, the newspaper in Tampa called him the miracle baby. I wouldn't use that terminology. But I remember one of our pastors, Reverend Ross Graham. He had prayed for him. We had churches in Japan praying for him. And the Lord answered prayer. And I remember when he was 2 years old, and we went to a conference in Florida. At that time, my daughter lived here in Florida. And Ross Graham was there. Ross Graham had prayed for him. And Ross Graham is about 6'2". I'm like 5'8". So I'm standing between Ross Graham and Noah. And Ross Graham says, that's the baby that we were praying for? And I go, yes. And the baby runs right past me to Ross Graham. He did it because Ross Graham is tall and he had to be up in the air. But there was this connection between him. Ross just started crying. Rossi started crying. You see, and I told my daughter, we prayed and the Lord said yes. Next time he might say no. He's still Lord, no matter what. So we can't depend on the extraordinary because it's the day by day by day. And that's the way the Lord works.
Yeah.
That's the way he works. Anyway, I shut up, and now it's your turn.
Yeah, no, again, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. You do have an incredible story, and, it's really God's story of working through you, and
yes, it is.
I'm so glad our listeners got to hear just a small part of it. And I want to thank them for joining us again for another episode of the Happy Holy Hour. I'll just close with this. This is one thing that you told me before I had gone into ministry. You told me that if you want to go into ministry, you have to have a big heart and thick skin. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. There are many things you taught me, but that one line has always stood out to me. And I think that sums you up perfectly. You have a big heart and you have thick skin. So again, Uncle Ben, I want to thank you for joining us. All right, well, that was Reverend Ben Alvira, again, giving his story and really just knowing him personally. This is just a really summary. Even though it was a longer interview, it's still only just a summary of all the different things. He has so many other stories like that as well. Can you imagine?
I feel I've only known him for the last 2 hours or so, and I feel like I know him entirely. It's crazy. I could not... I was glued into the story the whole time. I mean, just from the beginnings of how he grew up and his teenage years into how God had just used the people around him to transform him and give him a new heart. Yeah. And then that new heart literally just sent him into ministry like a rocket ship.
Yeah, he's always been an inspiration to me. Again, if you look at him as just a man and where he grew up and everything, you wouldn't think much of him, but when you get to know him, his just heart for the Lord, he is, God has been faithful to him, but he has also been faithful and always been committed to the Word of God and ministry. Everywhere he goes, he's always looking for someone to share the gospel with, someone to disciple, to mentor, and it's incredible. He has 3 children, but all the adopted children and grandchildren they brought in and raised in their home, and even me taking me in when I was an intern, and when we get to heaven one day, I think there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, that were God used Ben to reach them in some way for the gospel and to strengthen their walk with the Lord. So, what an example for us. And yeah, just the nature of his story is just so captivating. Even to have one experience like you talked about normally is,
life
altering and insane, that's your highlight story, but he has dozens of them, getting a gun pointed at him, getting beat, all these different things are just time and time again. And somehow God has preserved his life through all of this.
Oh, man.
But such a powerful story, and just what a man of God and what an inspiration and an example. When I listen to that, I feel convicted in my own heart, and I say, it's kind of like I now go and do likewise. He's someone who I can look to and say, he's what we need to be like, just like Paul said, follow my example as I follow Christ. I think we look at him and say, okay, we need to go and do likewise. So what a challenge for the church.
Yeah. And just the way God made himself evident to him in so many ways in his life and was faithful in calling him back to himself. And just an amazing story.
And he's so humble too about it.
You would never know. You would never really know these stories just by looking at him. But
and even though as he's telling the story, he doesn't say it prideful or anything like that.
Right.
And he's so humble about things, but definitely an inspiration for me.
Awesome story. Super awesome story. Well, thank you for tuning in for this set of interviews. We really appreciate it. We hope that you got something out of it and just enjoyed listening to these stories. Thank you for joining us today on the Happy Holy Hour. If you have any questions about any of this, or you want to have a deeper conversation with one of us about what it means to be a Christ follower, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our email address is happyholyhour@gmail.com. Send us an email or connect with us over social media, and we'd be glad to connect with you in that way. You can also leave us a voice message at our voicemail inbox at 484-961-0434. please send us your questions and your comments, and we would love to address them on the show. Also, prayerfully consider making a financial donation to the podcast. I mean, we are humbled that God has been using this podcast to share the gospel and to encourage individuals around the world, but it does cost us money to produce this podcast. And much of what we're currently doing is we're covering it ourselves, because we know this has been a difficult year for people and giving isn't maybe at the top of people's priority list. But consider donating to this podcast, because we can't make this happen without you. We would appreciate your financial support. And if that's not an option, please continue to pray for the podcast. We would appreciate that as well. Remember to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Leave a review so others can find the show. And visit our website for some really helpful resources. All right, until next time, God bless.